Betrayal isn't just a word. It's a dagger, twisting in the heart. Trust shattered in an instant. The man I called my best friend took everything. My wife, my daughters, my life. Each day, the pain gnawed at my soul. They moved on, happy in their new world, while I was left to pick up the pieces. But I couldn't just let it go. The fire inside demanded justice. Their smiles turned into regret, their peace into chaos. Now, they live with the scars. Because when you destroy a man's world, he will make sure you never forget. Divided, he fell. United, he rose. "Are the girls ready yet?" I asked my ex-wife Pauline a bit harshly as I stood at the door of what used to be our home. I had come to pick up my daughters, aged 13 and 12, for my weekend visit. "Almost. How are you, Sam?" she replied, sounding like she cared. "I only have them 2 weekends a month. Please have them ready on time," I said, avoiding her question. "I try to, Sam, but you know how it is with them. You can keep them a little longer if you need, so are you doing okay?" "I'll wait in the car," I said roughly, turning away from her. "Sam." I heard her call as I walked off. I didn't look back. We had this talk all the time, with her trying to ease her guilt and me not wanting to hear it. It took about 5 more minutes before my daughters, Karen and Wendy, finally burst out of the house with their small bag of things. They jumped into my car saying, "Sorry, Daddy," and my anger melted away. As much as I hated to admit it, Pauline was right. Getting girls this age anywhere on time was like trying to herd cats, and I could never stay mad at them for long. Since I only had them for a short time, I aimed to make those days special. I wanted to be the fun dad and not let everyday life get in the way. After they filled me in on everything they had done over the past couple of weeks, I got ready to share some big news. They had been asking me for the new Nintendo game system, and I was finally able to get it for them. I was excited to see their reactions, but when I told them, I was let down. "Oh, that's okay, Daddy," Karen said. "Daddy Dave already took us to get one, and some games, too." In an instant, I went from being excited to feeling furious. Daddy Dave, my best friend! If I thought I was upset before, this really pushed me over the edge. Let me explain. Dave was, and I emphasize was, my best friend since high school. He was a good guy who had better luck with business than with relationships. He wasn't a player or anything like that. He just hadn't found the right person yet. I had met a few of the women he dated, and while some were nice, none seemed right for him. Even though he wasn't family, my kids called him Uncle Dave, and we were fine with that. Pauline's best friend was Aunt Daphne. They were as close as siblings, and we thought nothing of it. I trusted them all as if they were family. I honestly had no clue anything was wrong. Nothing had changed in our marriage. Our life together was good. We got along well, and we still enjoyed our time together. One Friday night when I came home, Pauline told me our kids were staying with friends for the weekend. I thought she had planned a special weekend just for us, but I was wrong. I felt shocked when Pauline told me that she and Dave had developed feelings for each other, and she was going to give me divorce papers the next day. She said they had never crossed a line, or at least not in a full way, which I found hard to believe. At that moment, I realized it didn't really matter. She was planning to stay with Dave that night, and asked me to find another place to stay starting the next day. I told her to leave me alone and insisted that I wasn't going anywhere. I found out I was mistaken. What she didn't tell me was that there was a court order saying I had to leave the house. There were no claims of abuse or anything like that. Her lawyer just asked the judge for temporary custody of the kids in the house until a hearing could happen. The judge agreed, which meant I had to go. I didn't exactly fight the divorce, but I made a lot of noise about it. I made demands like wanting the house, full custody of the kids, and child support that was 75% of her salary. This dragged things out for a while, but eventually I got tired of it all. The warnings about wasting the court's time helped, and just signed the papers. I didn't have to pay alimony since our incomes were about the same, but I did have to pay child support, which took a big chunk out of my budget. I lived simply to afford some fun things every weekend when I had the girls, which is why I needed to save up for the video game system. If I could have looked at things clearly, I might have seen that Pauline was trying to keep things amicable considering the situation. But I didn't feel that way. Why should she act nice? She got everything she wanted, including a new wealthy husband, while I struggled to make ends meet and had the kids for only 4 days each month. It all came down to money. We had been doing fine together with our combined salaries. Now, you take away my salary but add Dave's much larger paycheck, plus the child support I was paying, and they were living well while I was just getting by. Pauline and Dave got married less than 2 months after the divorce was final. The hardest part for me was dealing with the kids. I thought they might resist or act out. Maybe say, "You're not my dad. You can't tell me what to do." But they took everything in stride. Dave had been in their lives for years, so when he moved in and became a bigger part of their world, it didn't bother them at all. The kids seemed happy to have 2 homes to visit, just like their friends. Pauline and Dave were celebrating their first anniversary, and I hadn't had a kind word for either of them since then. We only spoke about the kids. Now my girls were calling that traitor Daddy. I tried to keep my feelings to myself during the weekend, but by the time I was dropping the girls off at their house, I was really angry. I hugged the girls and watched them rush inside, likely eager to enjoy their new video game system as Pauline opened the door. "I need to talk to you," I said, sensing the sternness in my tone. I turned and walked away from the house, and Pauline shut the door and followed me. "What's the matter, Sam?" she asked. "Can you explain this Daddy Dave situation? They have one dad, and that's me. So why is he being called Daddy now?" The girls wanted something different than Uncle Dave since we were married. It felt unusual to call him Uncle when we were out together as a family, so we all talked and decided on Daddy Dave. "And who came up with that name?" "I think it was my idea, but the girls embraced it. I told them you might not like it, but they were confident you'd be fine with it. Please don't make this a bigger deal than it is, Sam." "You don't get to decide what's a big deal. What if they want to call another woman Mommy, especially the one who came into our lives and changed everything?" "That's not how it happened." "And what about the video games? You knew I wanted to get those for them, but Daddy Dave went and bought them. Why would you do that?" "We just thought they waited long enough and we didn't know when you could get them. We wanted the girls to have something to enjoy." "Yeah, and make me look bad while doing it." "Sam, please." "Sure, let's show how wonderful Daddy Dave is and how I'm not as good. While you are enjoying yourselves, I'm struggling to get by. You can just spend money freely." "It's not like that. I think it is. You're unbelievable." I turned and walked back to my car, feeling frustrated. I drove off without looking back, worried about the path my emotions might lead me down. For the next couple of years, things didn't improve. If Pauline and Dave hoped my frustration would fade, they were in for a surprise. They tried many times to have a conversation with me, mostly about my life and expressing hope that I could move past my anger, but I remained focused on what mattered most to me, my time with my daughters. Since my marriage ended, I hadn't pursued any romantic relationships. There were several reasons for that. First, I didn't have much extra money. I had received a few small raises, but it wasn't enough to bring about significant change. Second, I struggled to trust, often finding myself in brief connections with those who weren't interested in anything serious. Lastly, I was still very affected by my past, aware that I wouldn't be a good partner at that point. Feeling bitter, upset, and financially strained didn't attract others, and I never considered seeking help. The turning point for me came on the first weekend of June. School had just ended, and I was excited about spending a summer weekend with my girls. Karen was a very responsible 15, and Wendy was a charming 14. I loved every moment I spent with them. "Girls, are you ready?" I called out as Pauline opened the door, repeating our usual conversation. "They're not here, Sam," Pauline replied, looking puzzled. "What do you mean they're not here?" My frustration began to rise. They were invited by the Finleys to go to the beach for the week. They left this afternoon. They emailed you about it a week ago. "Yeah, and I replied that this was my weekend and I would be picking them up. You let them go?" "Of course. It wasn't my place to stop them." "No, why would you choose to complicate my life even more? Now you're just being—" "Tell them I'll be waiting to talk when they get back," I said, walking away again. That whole week was a blur of frustration and sadness. I felt so many negative emotions at once. I only got to see the girls 4 days a month, although we sometimes took extra days for special occasions, and I didn't want to miss any of those times. If only I had known. The following Friday night, I returned to the house to discuss their weekend plans without my knowledge. I had only entered the house a few times since the divorce, always at the girl's request. This time, I didn't want to have that conversation outside. I walked into the living room. Pauline and Dave were in the kitchen, watching me as I walked in. I wondered if they knew what was about to happen. The girls were waiting for me, and I tried hard to stay calm as I sat down across from them. "Mom said you wanted to talk to us about going with the Finleys this week? We sent you an email to tell you we were leaving," Karen began, and I replied that this is my weekend, and I thought you would want to be here with me, I said back. "Dad, I was just letting you know we were going. I wasn't asking for your approval." "What?" I nearly shouted. "You're not even 16. How do you think you can just decide something like that without asking me?" "I checked with Mom, Dad. She knows the Finleys and said it was okay as long as I told you." "And you thought an email telling me you were going was enough?" "Come on, Dad. I'm 15 now. We're not kids anymore. We want to hang out with our friends. I thought you would understand. I barely see you as it is. Are you saying you'd rather do things with your friends than spend time with me?" "Dad, I'm saying we're getting older and we want to spend time with our friends. I can't just tell them to fit their plans around my time with you. There's always something happening on weekends, pool parties, beach trips, and so on. We're hardly at home on weekends anymore." I realized my daughters were trying to convey that they preferred to be with their friends rather than me, but they weren't saying it out loud. It felt like a sharp pain in my heart, and I knew that this part of our lives was changing. I was no longer angry, but sadness filled me as I thought about the moments slipping away with my girls. I didn't want them to know how much this hurt me, so I tried to hold it together. "So do you want to stop the weekend visits altogether?" I asked. I thought I heard Pauline gasp, but the girls didn't react. "Maybe I imagined it. We're just busy, Dad. You remember how it was. That doesn't mean we don't care about you." That was how it felt to me. Only a few days each month, and they couldn't manage even that. They had their Mom and Daddy Dave the rest of the time. I felt like I no longer had a place in their lives. I never thought my time as a dad would change this much while they were still teenagers, but it had. "Okay, girls, I understand. We'll stop the visits and you enjoy yourselves." They both jumped up and hugged me tightly. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd get it." Then they ran off to their rooms to do whatever it was they wanted to do. It didn't seem to matter anymore. In their innocence, they didn't realize how much this affected me. My role in their lives had faded away. I stood up and started walking toward the front door. Pauline came over to stop me. "You okay, Sam?" I tried to pull myself together. I'm pretty sure I didn't do a good job, but I tried to look brave. "Yeah, I'm fine. This just gives me time to focus on some things I've been putting off. I have a friend in North Carolina who has wanted me to visit for years." I stepped outside, and it seemed to take a moment for Pauline to understand what I had just said. She quickly walked up to me and pulled my shoulder to turn me around. "Wait, Sam, you didn't just say you're moving to North Carolina, did you?" "Yeah, I did. Why not? You heard them. They don't need me here anymore, thanks to you. Now they don't even want me. This is all because of the choices you made, Pauline. There's nothing left for me. You left me, and now they have too. You two are their parents now. I'm out of their lives. You won." Tears started to fill my eyes, and I had to get away. I felt so embarrassed at the thought of crying in front of the two people who hurt me so much. I hurried out the front door to my car. My hands fumbled as I tried to get the key into the lock. No fancy remote for me. Maybe the tears were making it harder. "Sam, wait," I heard behind me. It was Dave's voice, and then I felt his hand on my shoulder. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and did what I had been feeling for a long time. He fell, but didn't stay down. Pauline rushed to his side to check on him while I struggled with my keys again. "Sam, don't do this. They're going through a hard time. They still love you and need you, even if they don't see it right now. Leaving will hurt them deeply." "What do you want me to do, Pauline? Sit in my small apartment waiting and wishing my daughters would want to see me? Or just be the backup plan if they don't have anything else to do?" "It won't be like that, Sam." "Yes, it will. You heard the same talk I did. I was only looking forward to their visits, and now that's gone. You'll break their hearts." I don't think that's true, but even if it is, I won't be alone in that. Sam, you saw how happy they looked about not having to come to my place anymore. Honestly, I doubt they'll even notice, at least for a while. Sam, please don't do this. I never wanted it to end this way. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. It doesn't matter. Maybe I'll see you again one day. Finally, I got the car door unlocked and opened it. Dave had gotten back on his feet, and they both stood there looking sad, though I wasn't sure if they really felt that way. I sat down in my car and paused before closing the door. I took one last look at them. Take care of my girls. They both nodded slightly and watched as I drove away. I wondered if they would talk to the girls. I hoped they wouldn't. I didn't want my daughters to feel like they had to see me out of pity or duty. It seemed like it was time for us to part ways. Breaking up a family is tough because it means giving up on dreams. Pauline and I used to talk a lot about growing old together, having our kids and grandkids visit, celebrating holidays, and all sorts of plans. With my marriage ending, many of those dreams felt lost to me. I had been looking forward to graduations, weddings, and the joy of grandkids, but now I thought that was all gone too. Maybe I would see the girls again one day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was really it. I called my friend Tim, and he told me he had a job ready for me. It would pay better, but I still planned to send money for child support. They didn't really need it, as I had said, but it was my last link to the girls. I wanted to show I cared for them. Just because I didn't want to feel the pain of being so near yet so far didn't mean I didn't love them and want to help. I wasn't completely honest when I said Tim had been trying to get me to North Carolina for years. He had just mentioned he'd always have a job for me if I needed it, and now seemed like the right time to take him up on that offer. My apartment lease had a rule allowing me to break it with a 30-day notice if I needed to move for work, so I had Tim send the letter for me. I had already paid the last month's rent, so I told them to keep the security deposit instead of me cleaning up. I packed my car with what I wanted to take, which honestly didn't fill it up much, and off I went. I drove as hard as I could, eager to get there fast. Mostly because when I was alone in the car, the hurt of being away from my girls was heavy in my mind. It was raining when I reached Durham, which felt like a sign of some sort. Tim owned a home services business and had a job lined up for me. I mostly took care of home repairs, but also did some pest control work. Tim suggested I get training for electrical and plumbing work too, and I told him I would think about it. Tim had never married. Instead, he went through a series of girlfriends, some very attractive and others quite plain. I don't think any of them thought Tim was looking for a long-term relationship, but they appreciated his generosity and fun lifestyle until something better came along. This seemed to work well for Tim. I liked the work, and it kept me busy during the day, but the nights were tough. I found myself drinking more than I used to and definitely more than I should have. Most mornings, I woke up in my apartment still in the same clothes as the day before, recalling the previous evening's activities. I was doing my best to forget. By the time I showered and changed into clean clothes, I usually felt much better. So, I didn't see any reason to change my routine right away. It helped me cope with my pain, even if I knew it wasn't great for my health. A few weeks after I got there, Tim hosted his yearly 4th of July party. He had a big house with a spacious backyard, which was perfect for throwing parties. He bought a lot of fireworks from a nearby stand that we let off when it got dark. The afternoon and evening were filled with drinks, music, swimming, and a little volleyball. I mostly spent my time drinking and enjoying the lively atmosphere, especially appreciating the company of women in their summer attire. I'm not sure how it happened, since the drinks made me forgetful, but I ended up spending time with a tall blonde named Melanie, or Melinda, let's just say Melanie. She had a friendly demeanor and a cheerful personality. We spent some time together, and I felt good about it. It had been a while since I had shared moments like this with anyone. I didn't remember much from that night, but I was glad to have some fun again. When I woke up the next morning, she was gone, but I felt at ease. As usual, my thoughts turned to my past relationships, and a wave of nostalgia hit me. It had been almost a month since I heard from the girls I cared about. I soon learned that Tim's parties happened every month, usually on holidays. August doesn't have many holidays, but that didn't stop Tim. He created a gathering for what he called August Days, which was just an excuse to celebrate. It was on the second Saturday and felt like any other event. My drinking habits hadn't changed. I ended up quite tipsy again. Unfortunately, Melanie, or whoever she was, wasn't at this gathering, which was a letdown. I didn't have strong feelings for her, but I was just hoping for something familiar. I guess I wasn't too bad looking because I found someone to spend time with that night. Roberta had long, reddish-brown hair, mostly brown, but it turned red in the sunlight. She had a pleasant appearance, and we seemed to enjoy spending time together. I enjoyed being with her, but I felt like our connection wasn't particularly strong compared to someone else I had been close to. I must have fallen asleep afterward, and just like before, she was gone when I woke up in the morning. Tim made me some breakfast, and then I went home feeling down. This pattern continued for the next few months. As I drank more, it became harder to remember the names of the people I'd met. The woman from Labor Day had blonde hair. I remember she was kind of quiet, and I felt fortunate to be spending time with someone like her. The woman from Halloween wore a costume, so I wouldn't have recognized her even if I hadn't been drinking. It was a masquerade party, so everyone wore masks. She had on a Wonder Woman outfit, and I think she had brown hair. Tim, being a veteran, threw a party around Veterans Day in November. Even though it was just a few weeks after Halloween, no one minded. With Thanksgiving coming up and it being my first without the girls, I drank heavily. I remember spending time with someone, but not much else. I woke up in the middle of the night, and when I reached out, I felt someone next to me. We exchanged a few words, but she was gone by morning. I only remember that she had a nice figure. Then I finally heard from my girls. It was about Thanksgiving, but it wasn't the kind of call I had hoped for. I wanted them to realize I didn't have any plans for the holiday and to tell them that I had moved far away. In the past, we would share Thanksgiving. One of us would have the morning and the other the evening, and we would switch each year. This year, it was my turn to have the evening. A week before the holiday, Karen called, but it wasn't to make plans or to apologize for not being in touch. Instead, she told me they had been invited to go shopping with the Finley family and asked if we could skip our Thanksgiving visit this year. 5 months had passed, and they still thought I lived nearby, just waiting for them to visit. I said nothing about my move and simply told them to enjoy their day. Thanksgiving turned out to be very lonely. I spent the day in a hotel room drinking alone. Tim wanted me to come to his place, but I just couldn't face being around a bunch of unfamiliar faces. I went to a hotel, expecting they might try to persuade me to come back, so I made sure no one could find me. When I woke up the next morning and turned on my phone, I saw many texts, missed calls, and voicemails. Most were from Tim, trying once more to invite me to join him and his friends for the holiday. There was a call from my daughter Karen's phone, too. The voicemail was a bright, happy Thanksgiving message from her and Wendy, along with a thank you for letting them go shopping. The last call was from Pauline. I knew I didn't want to hear her message, but against my better judgment, I listened anyway. Sam, this is Pauline. I know we haven't talked in a while. I thought you wanted it that way. I understand holidays can be tough for those far away from family, so I wanted to check on you. I heard the girls called you. They probably don't realize you've moved yet. Just remember they are kids, busy with their own lives, but they still care about you very much. I know you may not want to talk to me, but please let me know you're okay. A message or text is fine. I truly regret how things turned out. That's all for now. Please let me know you're all right. I deleted all the texts and emails, then sent a quick message to Pauline to let her know I was alive, though that didn't mean I was okay. I didn't really want to do that, but it seemed easier than facing the consequences of not replying. Not having anything else to do, I opened another beer. It wouldn't fix my pain forever, but it was fine for a little while. For the next few weeks, I struggled to hold it together. If I wasn't working, I was drinking or passed out from drinking. Somehow I managed to stay sober enough to work, but it was a close call sometimes. As Christmas and New Year's approached, my first without my girls, my sadness grew stronger. I felt like no one had ever experienced the pain I felt or gone through what I had, at least in my mind. I knew other people had faced much worse, but it didn't stop me from feeling that I had it worse than anyone else. The call I had been waiting for finally came. First, it was a call from the girls, which I didn't answer, asking about Christmas plans. Since the divorce, we had been swapping Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. This year, it was my turn for Christmas Eve. and they left me a message to confirm. I took a few days to gather the courage to call them back and brace myself for the talk I had been avoiding for 6 months. But then a call from Pauline interrupted my plans. Pauline's voice message was clearly filled with frustration. "Sam, it's Pauline. I hope you didn't just ignore the girl's message. I finally had to tell them you moved away. They are really hurt. They thought they could see you any time, and finding out that's not true hit them hard. I hope you feel good about affecting them this way." I hate to say this, Sam, but right now I can't trust you with them. I know you wouldn't mean any harm, but it seems like you're trying to create distance to get back at me. I was going to suggest they come visit you, but I'm not sure about that anymore. Please think about how you're impacting them. Don't jeopardize your relationship with them just because you're upset with me. They are just teenagers navigating their own feelings. Call me anytime if you want to talk about this or anything else. Merry Christmas, Sam. You're unbelievable, I shouted at no one, since I was alone. I drank a couple more beers and then called her back. Sam? You're unbelievable, I slurred. Who do you think you are? You can't take my kids away from me when I can't even see them. Sam, are you drunk? Let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty drunk. You shouldn't drink so much, Sam. It's not good for you. Not good for me? Why do you care? You took everything I had to live for. Why do you care what I do? I do care about you, Sam. Yeah, I saw how much you cared when you left for Dave. I saw how much you cared when the kids stopped seeing me too. I didn't do that. That's a lie, Pauline. You made sure they left on my weekend so they wouldn't have to see me anymore. You're a liar and a cheat who doesn't care about me. I heard her take a deep breath. Sam, I know you're upset, so I won't argue right now. Let's talk when you're feeling better. How can you judge me? You turned your back on me. I'm hanging up now, Sam. And now you judge me. You have some nerve, Pauline. But there was silence. She had hung up. Unbelievable. I spent Christmas alone. I stayed in bed most of the day. I tried to distract myself with sports on TV, but every reminder that it was Christmas made me feel worse and led me to drink even more. I woke up to a Lakers game, either having fallen asleep or passed out. I smiled when I saw the Lakers trailing by 20 points to the Rockets. Then I went out for a bit. With Tim's service company, there isn't much time off. We can't just shut down for holidays like some other businesses. Tim had a contract with a mortgage company to fix up a house that had been damaged by the owners after it was taken back. There were a few of us there, including plumbing and electrical workers. I was working on some of the drywall, and I had a good time these past few days. These guys knew how to joke around and have fun. It felt nice because when I worked with other teams in the past few months, they seemed distant, like they were struggling to accept me. I thought maybe it was because Tim and I knew each other before I started here. But this crew was friendly, and I enjoyed the teamwork. Around mid-morning, I saw Tim's truck pull up outside. He got out of the driver's seat along with another guy I recognized but couldn't name. They walked into the house, greeting the team as they entered, and then came over to me. "Hey, Sam, can I talk to you for a minute?" Tim asked. "Sure, Tim. I can always find time for the guy who pays me," I replied, hoping to get a laugh from the others. It worked, but Tim barely smiled. "Let's step outside for a moment," he said, turning to go out the door, and I followed him. Once outside, the other guy stepped away to give us some space. "How are you doing, Sam?" he asked. "I'm doing all right, I guess," I replied, curious about what he wanted. Good, good. Have you had anything to drink?" "Only every night for the last 6 months," I joked. Tim gave a small smile, but it didn't feel very happy. "Yeah, I know, I mean today," he said, suddenly serious. "What? No, Tim, not today." "Great, I'm glad to hear that, but can you do me a favor? Blow into this." He pulled a small white device out of his pocket and held it up to me. I looked at it unsurely. "What is it?" "It's a breathalyzer. I just need to check." I glanced around. The other guy was watching me, and my coworkers looked concerned when I turned back toward the house. It seemed like I wasn't as accepted by the group as I thought. Tim wouldn't be here unless someone had told him something. Well, I might have had a beer this morning, I admitted slowly, knowing that wouldn't please him. "Oh, then that's not too bad," he replied, holding the breathalyzer up again. Knowing there was no way out of this, I took the device and blew into it. I didn't know what the result would be, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be good. Tim took the device back and looked at the display. The small smile he had vanished quickly. You blew .04, Sam. That's more than a beer this morning. Okay, but I'm not really drunk, I replied. That's what they look for when you drive, Sam. But if something happens at work and OSHA checks you, they'll find out you've been drinking. Then I'll be in trouble too, not to mention what could happen if someone gets hurt. Tim, I'm okay. You're not okay, he said, raising his voice. What you do at home is your business, but when you bring that here and put me and my team at risk, it becomes my problem. I need your keys. One good thing about working for Tim was having company vehicles. We took them home every night so we could go straight to work with what we needed. I handed over the keys. You're done for today. Here's what's going to happen. Oscar will drive you home and then come back here to fill in for you. Tomorrow, instead of coming here, you'll come to my office and we'll talk about this. I stood there, feeling embarrassed. But instead of being sorry, I was getting angry. I was fine. I didn't need to be sent home like a child. This was ridiculous. You know what, Tim? I said, taking off my hard hat and pushing it into his chest. Forget you. I don't need this. I walked away from him and got into the passenger seat of my truck, waiting for Oscar to drive me home. He quietly climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. We drove in silence back to my apartment, except for when I gave him directions. When we got to my place, I quickly thanked him and went inside, closing the door behind me. I was furious. I felt perfectly fine and was not having any issues. Someone must have told Tim something. I couldn't believe it. I didn't need others judging me for my choices. I opened the fridge and saw my stash of beer. I thought, why not? It wasn't like I had to go to work tomorrow. I woke up in a bright room I recognized as a hospital. I had no idea how I got there, but I felt bad enough to think the hospital was a good idea. A few minutes later, a nurse walked in. Good. You're awake. What happened? I asked, still feeling groggy. The doctor will be in to talk to you soon, she said, as she checked some machines and my IV. Then she left, probably to get the doctor. I looked around the room. The walls were a light color, and there was a dry erase board that said my nurse's name was Brenda and my doctor's name was Anderson. I assumed the doctor would be a man, but imagine my surprise when a very nice-looking woman who was a doctor walked in a few minutes later. She seemed to be in her 30s and looked Hispanic. She was reviewing something on her clipboard. Good afternoon, Mr. Beckman. It's nice to see you awake. How are you feeling? She asked. I didn't respond immediately, still adjusting to the situation. Mr. Beckman? She repeated. I'm sorry, I said. I expected someone different with the name Anderson, so I'm a bit surprised. Well, thank you. If it makes any difference, my husband is a white guy, but he's not old yet. That's where the name comes from. Now, how are you feeling? I'm very tired and just not great, I guess. What's wrong with me? From your test results, it looks like you have consumed a significant amount of alcohol over time. You have alcohol poisoning and you're also very dehydrated. If your friend hadn't called for help when he did, you might not be here right now. Friend? The doctor looked at her papers for a moment. The ambulance was called by a man named Tim Banks. Of course. Mr. Banks asked to be told when you woke up, but I need your permission. Is that okay? I wanted to say no, but I nodded. Yeah, that's fine. We will keep you here for a couple of days to monitor your recovery. As your body clears itself, there may be some complications that we need to address. Any questions, Mr. Beckman? I don't think so. After telling me to rest, Dr. Anderson left the room and I was alone. I turned on the TV for some noise and settled back to try and relax. I felt okay, so I doubted I would actually need to stay for 2 days. But who was I to argue with the doctor? About an hour later, there was a knock at my door and it opened a little. I heard a man's voice. You dressed? Tim? Yeah. He walked into the room with his usual relaxed style, stopping a few feet from the bed. How you doing? I'll be fine. I haven't decided yet if that's a good thing or a bad thing, I replied with a faint smile. I guess I owe you a thank you. No need, Sam. You can thank me by getting better and returning to work. I didn't think I still had a job. What, you think you're the first person to tell me to get lost? Sam, we've been friends for a long time. I'm just trying to help you through this. I don't agree with all your choices, and honestly, I don't think she's worth it. My advice? Get up, get your life together, and try to fix things with your kids. What Pauline did ended your marriage and hurt your family. Don't let it ruin your life." I knew Tim was right. I wasn't hurting anyone but myself, and maybe the girls. I was probably giving Pauline exactly what she wanted. It was time to get my life together. Tim and I talked for another hour before he left. As the night went on, I started to feel worse. The doctor told me that was my body adjusting to not having alcohol. I hadn't had a drink in about 24 hours, which hadn't happened in months, and my body was reacting badly. It struck me as really sad. I made it through the night and checked out the next day. They gave me some contacts for counselors, doctors, rehab centers, and Alcoholics Anonymous. I kept those papers close, but deep down, I felt like I was already at my lowest point and didn't really need them. I believed that what Tim said, along with the good care I received in the hospital, would be enough to help me stay on the right path. I stayed away from work for a couple of weeks. Tim was very supportive, both in letting me take time off and understanding what I'd shared with him. I had saved enough money so the time off didn't hurt me financially. When I returned to work, I was full of energy. The next couple of months went by well. The Martin Luther King Jr. day party at Tim's was fun, and I didn't have a single drink. I didn't think I was an alcoholic, but I didn't want to take any chances. I thought I might drink beer again someday, but for now, I decided to stick to non-alcoholic drinks. The truth is, the monthly parties were starting to feel tiring. At first, I thought they'd help me make friends, but wild and anonymous encounters weren't for me. So I skipped the Valentine's Day party and treated myself to a big steak dinner instead. On March 1st, my life changed. It was a Saturday, and I was running errands. As I walked into the grocery store, I noticed a girl with a wild mane of dark blonde curls suddenly fall hard onto the sidewalk. I quickly realized she must have tripped on the curb and hurt herself. She was holding her ankle and wincing in pain. The few people around didn't pay much attention, so I hurried over to her. "Are you okay?" I asked. I knew it was a silly question, but I didn't know what else to say. She looked up at me, tears forming in her pale blue eyes. "I think I sprained my ankle. We should get you to a hospital. I can call an ambulance, but I'd be happy to take you myself if that works for you. I don't want to bother you." "Bother me? Not at all. You just made my day a lot more interesting. I'm Sam, by the way." "Okay, if you really don't mind. It's nice to meet you, Sam. My name is Holly." I helped her get up, and as she straightened, I noticed something. "You're expecting a baby?" "Oh yeah, I'm about 4 months along." "Let's hurry then, just to be safe." I picked her up and carried her to my truck. I set her down for a moment to open the door, then lifted her into the passenger seat. She was small, so it wasn't hard, but lifting anyone can be tricky. We drove the short distance to the emergency room at the local hospital. I went inside and asked for a wheelchair, then helped Holly into it after getting her out of the truck. There weren't any other patients waiting, so they took her straight to a room. I figured I should wait outside since she didn't say I could come in. I waited there for 4 hours. To pass the time, I played games and browsed the internet on my phone. I thought she might call her mother at some point, and then I would quietly leave. But everyone who arrived was either a patient or there for someone else. So I kept waiting and waiting. Finally, the big doors opened, and Holly came out in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse in light blue scrubs. I guessed she might be a UNC fan, but it could have just been a coincidence. Holly was talking to the nurse as they rolled out, and I caught the word taxi. The nurse didn't seem to pay much attention to me since she was focused on Holly. When Holly turned around and saw me, the smile on her face was bright, like a star. The nurse pushed her over to me, giving a look that asked where to go next. I led her outside to my truck and helped her inside. I thanked the nurse, but she had already turned away. I got into the driver's seat. "I didn't think you would still be here," Holly said. "I was going to wait until someone came for you, but no one did, so I stayed." "I don't have a husband. It's just me and my mom, and she's out of town for work." "Have you called her?" "She would just worry and want to rush home. I'll be fine. Since you waited, could I ask for a ride back to my car?" I looked at her bandaged ankle and then back at her. "Holly, I don't think you can drive with that ankle." "Oh, Sam, I didn't even think of that," she replied, also looking at her ankle. "If you don't mind, why don't I take you home and then we can figure out how to get your car?" "That's really nice of you, Sam, But I feel like I've taken up too much of your time. Maybe, but it's been enjoyable for me and way better than sitting at home. I'd be glad to keep helping if you're okay with it. Thank you, Sam. She gave me directions to her house, the one she shared with her mom. I pulled into the empty driveway and parked, then carried Holly from the truck to the house. I started to walk toward the couch, but she stopped me. Sam, I'm sorry, but I really need to use the restroom. Can you help me? I turned toward the hallway and followed her to the restroom. I helped her to the door and waited outside while she was inside. While I waited, I ordered an Uber. She called out to me, and when I went back in, I saw she had managed to stand and get ready. I lifted her again and took her to the couch. What do we do now? She asked. Well, I need to go get your car. Parking overnight isn't allowed down there. How will you do that? I ordered an Uber to take me. Can I have your keys? Oh, Sam, you really don't have to, but I appreciate it. She gave me the keys and told me where her car was parked. I went outside to wait for my ride. It was only supposed to take a few minutes. Just before I left, I said, Holly, would you have dinner with me tonight? I'd love to, Sam, she said, smiling brightly, but I'm not really ready to go out. Of course. I was thinking I would grab something to eat while I get your car and bring it back here. I was about to leave when I heard her say softly, Sam. I turned around and saw her looking more serious. Sam, you do remember that I'm pregnant, right? I know, Holly, of course I remember. Why do you ask? A lot of men don't want to take on a family right away. I wanted to make sure you knew what you were getting into. Holly, we just met, so we have a lot to learn about each other. But I promise, your pregnancy is not a problem for me. Okay, Sam. I just wanted to be sure. I understand. I'll be back as soon as I can. With her keys in hand, I went to the curb to wait for my Uber, which arrived about 10 minutes later. The ride was smooth, and I found her car without much trouble. I decided to get some Italian food, so I found a nearby restaurant and ordered takeout. It was almost 7 p.m. when I got back to Holly's house with the food. I saw her sitting in the same spot, but she had changed into a dress. I wanted to look nice for our first dinner, she said. You could have stayed in what you were wearing, but you still look great. She smiled as I set the food on the table. By the time I returned to her, she had stood up and was slowly making her way toward me with crutches. I moved to help her, but she stopped me. I need to practice. My mom won't be home for a couple of days. I pulled out her chair and she carefully sat down. As she did, I noticed the lovely scent of her perfume. You look and smell wonderful, Holly. Now I feel a little messy. Oh, you look nice, she replied. I have to say, I don't really like men who are too fancy, she said. We talked about simple things. I told her about my job at Tim's company, Durham Commercial Services, and she shared about her part-time work at a local car dealership in the title department. Her mom was a legal secretary and was the main breadwinner. Her dad had left when Holly was 5, and she hadn't heard from him since. She was an only child. I explained what happened in my marriage, or rather the end of it. She was shocked by what Pauline did, but she seemed less pleased with how I dealt with the situation with Karen and Wendy. She didn't say much, but as I spoke, I realized I wasn't happy with how I acted either. It hurt to admit, but Pauline had a point when she said they were just being kids, and I should have been the grown-up. I needed to think about how to fix that. I carefully skipped the topic of how she ended up 4 months pregnant without a husband or boyfriend. It wasn't my place to ask, and I didn't want to sound judgmental. At one point, her phone rang, so I went outside to give her time to talk to her mom. It was a nice evening with a cool breeze and a few clouds hiding the moonlight. I looked up at the sky and thought about the lovely blonde woman inside. It had been a few years since my marriage ended, and I hadn't been in a long-term relationship since then. Suddenly, it felt like the right time to think about that again. Did I really want to spend my life alone just because my first choice turned out to be unfaithful? I needed to get a grip on those feelings that Pauline brought out in me. When she finished her call, Holly peeked out to let me know I could come back in. She thanked me for giving her privacy. The rest of the evening was spent on the couch, chatting about everything except how her baby had come to be. She didn't bring it up. I didn't ask. Before I knew it, it was midnight, and we both yawned, signaling it was time to go to bed. She walked me to the door, and we shared a quick, affectionate gesture before making plans for me to visit again the next day to spend Sunday together. I drove home feeling happy and slept soundly. The next day, I arrived at her house around 9 a.m. with breakfast from a nearby cafe. I had French toast, sausage, and hash browns. It cost me a bit, but I didn't care. I knocked on the door and waited patiently since Holly was on crutches. When she opened the door, it was clear she had just woken up. Her hair was tousled, and she wore her brace and a green nightshirt. "Wow, are you up this early every morning?" she said, squinting her eyes and giving me a smile. "It's part of the job. Construction starts early. I was just waiting for a decent time to get going," I replied. "Well, you brought breakfast, so I guess that makes up for it." After another brief moment of warmth, I went to make breakfast while she settled into a chair. She loved the food, which didn't surprise me since I knew she enjoyed it from before. I suggested we spend the day driving around the countryside. I had been living in North Carolina for a few months, but I hadn't really explored beyond work and Tim's parties, so we set off. It was a lovely day, and we had a great time. We visited a museum which thankfully had motorized carts, so Holly wouldn't have to walk a lot. We grabbed lunch at a small local diner and spent a few hours relaxing in a park we stumbled upon. It felt nice, and I noticed Holly often reached for me, whether it was a hand on mine or leaning against me. When we returned to her place, she was quite tired and her leg was sore. I ran a bath for her and covered her brace with plastic to keep it dry. I kept myself busy while she bathed and then helped her into bed. We planned for me to come over after work the next evening. She usually worked on Mondays but was taking a few days off to rest her foot. I brought some tacos from a local family-owned place and we chatted some more. I gave her a nice foot rub as we talked, and pretty soon she was drifting off to sleep. I tucked her in and was about to leave when she sleepily thanked me for coming over and mentioned her mom would be home tomorrow. Before I could think about what that meant, she was fast asleep. As I walked to my car, I thought she was telling me she didn't need me to come over since her mom was returning. The next night, I was at home getting ready to watch a documentary about World War II and figuring out how to eat a frozen meal. Seriously, what is Salisbury steak? When my phone rang. "Hello? Where are you?" Holly asked. "I'm at home." "Why aren't you here? I thought you were coming over." I thought you didn't want me there since your mom was coming home. You even reminded me of it before I left last night," I said, a bit confused. "Ugh, men! I told you that so you'd know to meet her. We've been waiting for you." "Okay, I'm on my way." Holly opened the door with a warm smile, greeting me with open arms. I could definitely get used to this. I walked into the house, and Holly's mom, Barbara, was bringing some food to the dinner table. They looked so much alike that they could be sisters, except for the age difference. Barbara had curly blonde hair that was a bit more tidy than Holly's. She was in great shape and probably weighed just a little more than Holly. I went over to greet her, thinking we would shake hands, but instead she moved my hand aside and pulled me into a warm hug, giving me a gentle kiss on the cheek. "I'm so happy to meet you, Sam. Holly has told me a lot about you." "The pleasure is mine, Miss Ellison. Please, just call me Barbara. And just so you know, Ellison is Holly's last name, but it's not mine. My last name is Smith, thanks to my most recent husband. He was husband number 3, and I don't plan on having a 4th. I glanced at Holly, who rolled her eyes at her mom. I guess it was good to get that out in the open. Since dinner was ready, I washed my hands quickly, and then we sat down to eat. Barbara made stuffed pasta and garlic bread, and it was delicious. "I'm sorry for the mix-up, Barbara. I thought Holly meant I shouldn't come over since you were coming home tonight." "That's totally fine, Sam. Misunderstandings happen. I was just excited to meet Holly's new boyfriend." I looked at Holly when she said boyfriend, and she smiled back at me. "She's told me quite a bit about you. I hear you work in construction?" "I work for Durham Commercial Services. I do some construction work like putting up drywall, but we also handle pest control, electrical work, and plumbing. It's more about home maintenance than just construction." "Do you enjoy it?" "I like using my hands. My boss has mentioned that he might let me be a project manager soon. What about you?" "I'm a legal secretary. I work closely with the senior partners, so I often have long hours and travel a lot. Thank you for being here to take care of Holly when she got hurt." "It was my pleasure, Barbara. It's been a while since I've had someone to care for." I felt a wave of sadness wash over me as I thought about my daughters. I tried to shake it off quickly, but I noticed that both Holly and Barbara seemed to notice my change in mood. We talked about different things during dinner, and then I helped clean up. By the time I finished, it was getting late. Holly and Barbara seemed ready to say goodnight, and then Barbara walked over to me. "I'm quite tired, so I'm going to head to bed. Traveling really wears me out these days. It was lovely to meet you." She gave me another hug and a gentle gesture of appreciation before heading down the hall to her bedroom. The house was a cozy 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Barbara had the main bedroom at the back of the house, and Holly used the other bedroom with the bathroom just across the hall. Holly asked me to turn off all the lights while she picked a movie on Netflix. The couch was big and cozy, which gave us plenty of room to sit together. I lay behind her on my left side, and she was in front of me. The movie was a love story, but I couldn't take my eyes off the lovely woman in front of me. She smelled sweet like jasmine, and her hair was neatly tied up, highlighting her smooth, pale neck. I wrapped my arm around her waist, and she held my hand. I leaned in closer, feeling a mix of excitement and affection. As I moved in, Holly tilted her head slightly, making it easier for me to express my feelings. I placed gentle gestures along her neck, and she sighed lightly, squeezing my hand to show she appreciated it. After a while, she let go of my hand and ran her fingers through my hair. With my free hand, I gently touched her belly, remembering how much Pauline enjoyed that when she was expecting. "That feels nice," Holly whispered. I added little kisses to her ears along with the ones on her neck. By now, we had completely forgotten about the movie. As my hand moved across her belly, I accidentally brushed against her chest. I took my time, gently rubbing her belly before moving my hand upwards. "That feels even better," she said softly. I spent a few moments comforting her, which made her shiver a little. Eventually, she turned around to lie on her back. I thought I saw her smile and heard a little giggle. "What's so funny?" I asked. "I was just thinking that we had this whole place to ourselves for 3 days, but you waited for my mom to come home to make your move," she replied, giggling again. I had to admit that was a bit amusing. "To be fair, I didn't know I was your boyfriend until your mom said it," I replied. "Oh, you're definitely my boyfriend," she said with a mischievous smile before leaning in closer. I kept my hand on her belly as we shared a warm moment. Our lips met gently, and as time passed, I moved my hand lower, resting it comfortably. We lay down facing each other, though I turned slightly to give us some space. Holly had changed into something more comfortable, and we enjoyed each other's company while I touched her gently and she held me. As she became more engaged, our moments together deepened. Soon, we paused for a moment, focusing on what we were experiencing. After a bit, I felt a rush of emotions. Holly softly rubbed my arm, which felt very nice. As the credits rolled on the TV, we relaxed together, feeling happy and content. Minutes went by, and we both dozed off. I woke up an hour later and gently roused Holly. We shared more tender moments then. "You should probably go now. You have work tomorrow," Holly said, breaking the silence. She was right, but I didn't want to leave. I was ready to wake up early and head home if I needed to. Holly slowly got up from the couch, and I followed as I put on my jeans. We walked to the front door, and as I touched the doorknob, she held my chin and turned my face to hers. "See you tomorrow?" "Of course." We shared one last goodbye, and then I stepped outside to my truck. When I looked back, she was still in the doorway, and we waved as I started the engine and drove away. I hoped I wasn't being too hopeful. Last night felt like a time to explore and understand each other more. I had to leave early to be ready for work, but I didn't want that to happen again, so I had a change of clothes for the next day just in case. I didn't plan to bring it up with Holly unless it came up naturally. Barbara greeted me when I arrived, and I joined Holly on the couch. When Barbara called us for dinner, I noticed there were only 2 plates. Holly and I sat down while Barbara stepped out. About 30 minutes later, she came back looking dressed for a night out. "In case Holly didn't tell you, I have a date tonight. I'll be back in the morning. You kids enjoy your evening," she said before leaving. With that, it was just Holly and me on the couch, and I turned to her. "Back in the morning?" I asked. "Mom isn't looking for anything serious, but sometimes goes out with different men. She often takes the chance to enjoy herself," Holly explained. "So, your mom went out to have fun?" I asked. "Pretty much, yeah. So that means we have the place to ourselves for the whole night." She smiled, showing she was content. I brought a change of clothes. "Thank goodness. Go grab them now so we don't have to think about them later." I got my bag from the truck and went back to the house. By the time I got inside, Holly had dimmed the living room lights, but I could see her lying on the couch. I walked over to her and was surprised to find her comfortably lying there. "I want you to stay close, Sam. I want you to stay close all night long." I changed out of my clothes and joined her on the couch. We took our time, just like we had the night before. We relaxed and enjoyed each other's company, sharing soft kisses and warm embraces. "As nice as this couch is, I think we'll be more comfortable in the bedroom," I suggested. "Will you carry me?" she asked. Of course, I said yes. I placed her gently on the bed, then climbed in next to her. We spent the night close, comforting each other with gentle touches and kind words. She was younger than me, which helped a lot. Once I was good to go, she turned on her side with her back to me. This made it easier for her and allowed me to hold her close. She reached down and drew me nearer, creating a comforting warmth between us. We both let out soft sounds of joy. She wrapped her arm around my neck while I touched her gently. I wasn't usually a fan of what had happened before, but it didn't bother me at that moment. After a while, we decided to change positions. She lay on her back, and I knelt between her legs, careful to rest her hurt ankle on my shoulder. It was a bit uncomfortable for her, but Holly wanted to stay like that so she could see my face, and I liked looking at her too. I started slow, being careful not to jar her ankle, but she encouraged me, saying, "Harder, Sam, it's okay, go for it." So I did as she asked, wanting to make her happy. We didn't spend the entire night together, but we connected 3 times that evening. The brief interactions I had when I first came to North Carolina served their purpose, but they were not the same as sharing meaningful moments with a woman I truly cared about. I had missed that. I spent nearly every night with Holly for the next week. We found ways to connect while being mindful of her ankle. I felt tired during the day but couldn't help smiling. A little over 2 weeks later, I was at the job site. Holly and I had spent almost every night together, though some were just for sleeping, as I was feeling very tired at work, and that was risky. Things felt a bit routine when Tim and Oscar arrived together. I quickly scanned for any signs that someone had told on me, but nothing seemed off. I wasn't worried because I hadn't had a drink since leaving the hospital, but I was frustrated that someone might be trying to cause trouble again. To my surprise, Tim walked into the house we were working in while Oscar stayed by the truck. Tim greeted the workers, giving praise for a job well done. Finally, he came over to me, and I thought, "Here we go. Got a second, Sam?" I nodded and walked over to join him. I looked for a breathalyzer, but didn't see one. "Everything good, boss?" "Yep. Just checking in during my site visits. I noticed you missed the last couple of parties, which is totally fine. I just wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm great, Tim. I've started seeing someone." "That's wonderful, Sam. I'm happy to see you getting back into life." "Have you made any progress with the kids?" "Actually, about that. I'll need some time off whenever it works for you. I'm going to fly back and see them." "That's great, Sam. Just let me know when and for how long, and I'll make sure you're all set. I'll check flights when I get home and let you know." I flew out the following Tuesday. I thought the girls might be busy over the weekend and possibly not at home. We usually expected the girls to be home at night, and I figured the rules would still be the same. Wanting to spend time with them, I decided to treat myself to a nicer hotel room with 2 queen-sized beds. I was ready to do everything possible to improve our relationship. As the plane flew through the clouds, I thought about Holly and our goodbye. She had helped me find flights and pack. She was moving around better now, but I still carried her up the stairs to my apartment, and we shared a heartfelt moment in my bed instead of hers for the first time. We were at her house when it was time for me to leave for the airport. She said goodbye at the door. We shared a long, gentle exchange, and her forehead rested on my chest after we pulled apart, her arms still around me. "I'm going to miss you, Sam. I love you." I sensed some hesitation in her eyes as she said that for the first time. She didn't need to feel that way. I gently lifted her chin to meet her gaze. "I love you too, Holly. I'll be back as soon as I can." She smiled widely and embraced me again, then I said goodbye. I held on to those warm feelings all the way back to Austin. My flight landed around midday, so I grabbed some lunch and checked into my hotel. I picked up a few things I thought I'd need for my stay, and then I waited. The girls usually got home from school around 4:30, so I thought that would still be the case. Then they would have homework until dinner. I wondered if that was still the routine and decided to stick with that thought for now. At 5:15, I pulled up in front of the house in my rental car. Pauline's Toyota was parked in the driveway, along with an older Nissan I didn't recognize. Dave's car was missing, so I figured he was still at work. I half expected someone to come out as I walked up the path, but no one did. I took that to mean no one noticed me, but it could also mean no one was curious. I would find out soon enough. I knocked on the door and waited, hearing a coming from inside. The door opened, and there stood Pauline, looking as lovely as ever. But I also realized that I didn't have any feelings for her now, which I couldn't have honestly said before. She looked surprised to see me standing there. She rushed over and wrapped her arms around me. I'm not sure I would have hugged her back, but she had my arms pinned, so it didn't matter. "Sam! Oh my goodness, it's you! Are you back? Did you move back? The girls will be so happy!" She finally released me and stepped back. "No, Pauline, I haven't moved back. I flew out to see the girls." She looked a bit let down by my answer, and I figured it was because of the girls, not her. I briefly wondered if everything was okay in her new marriage, but that wasn't my concern, so I pushed the thought away. "Oh, okay. They're doing their homework. I'll get them." "Pauline, wait. I need to tell you something first." She closed the door and turned to listen. She seemed nervous, probably thinking I was about to say something unpleasant. "Pauline, I just want to say I'm sorry for how I spoke to you on the phone that time. You know the one, right?" She nodded. "I was hurt. I was upset." "You were drunk." "I was drunk, and that was not good. I didn't want to say it, but you were right. I could barely take care of myself, let alone the girls. Still, you didn't deserve to hear those words from me, and I wanted to apologize." "Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate it. It was a hard time for everyone. Are you in town for long?" "I'm flying back on Sunday. I wanted to spend at least a couple of days with the girls. Why don't you keep them the whole time you're here? I'll have them pack for a few days." "Thanks. I'd appreciate that a lot, Pauline." "Sam, would you think about coming by tomorrow to talk after you drop the girls at school? Just us." I expected this. Pauline always wanted to talk things over. I figured she mostly wanted to ease her own worries, but I thought it was time for another conversation. After taking a deep breath, I replied, "Sure, Pauline, I can do that." She seemed happy, maybe thinking my agreement meant more than it did, and smiled. "Great. Tomorrow, then. I'll go get the girls and have them pack." Before I knew it, the front door flew open and my girls ran out, tackling me with all their strength. I couldn't catch any clear sentences, but I heard plenty of "sorry," "forgive us," and "I love you." Soon we ended up on the lawn, me on my back and the girls sprawled out on top of me. They seemed to have grown so much in a short time. They both tried to talk at once, so I raised my hand to quiet them. "Girls, you don't need to be sorry and you don't need to ask for forgiveness. I was the adult. Well, I was supposed to be. And what happened was my fault. I had already lost your mom and it felt like I was losing you too. I didn't handle it well." "Yeah, Dad. But we could have been nicer," said Wendy. "But if we blame each other, it just makes teenagers look bad." I laughed, trying to ease the tension. "Look, girls, we can argue about blame, but I want to focus on moving ahead. Your mom said I can keep you until Sunday, so pack your bags." "Oh, Dad, but this weekend." "Don't worry about this weekend, young lady," Pauline said, cutting in. "Now go and pack." I watched as the girls quickly went to their rooms, making sure they weren't around. "This weekend?" I asked Pauline. "We had planned to take them to the lake," she explained. "Dave's parents have a house there. It can wait. This is more important." "Thanks, Pauline. I didn't mean to mess up your plans." She nodded and then went to check on the girls. I headed to my rental car to make sure there was enough space for their bags, and soon we were on our way. We stopped by the hotel and unloaded their things. The girls flopped on the bed they would share and looked around. For dinner, we went to Texas Roadhouse. I pretended to be surprised when Karen ordered a salad. Okay, it was a big salad and really tasty, but come on, it's a steakhouse. Wendy impressed me by ordering a steak and a loaded baked potato. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. The evening was spent catching up on their lives. Karen had a boyfriend now. Is any dad really ready for his daughter's first boyfriend? His name was Rob, and he was in some of her classes. She showed me a picture, and he seemed nice enough, but I remember being a teenage boy. Eventually, I had to remind them to finish their homework. I relaxed and looked at things online, thankful that my feelings of anger had only cost me some time with my daughters, not the chance to be with them. A few times I caught myself just watching them. They smiled back at me, and we returned to what we were doing. It was nice. The next morning, I took them to school and then made the drive back to my old house to talk to Pauline. Honestly, I wasn't sure why we needed to meet. We were divorced and had been for years. I wanted to talk about the girls and be more involved in their lives, even with the distance. But I wasn't sure if that was what Pauline wanted. I was just halfway to the door when Pauline opened it, waiting for me. She had a glass of water for each of us, and we sat at the kitchen table. Memories flooded back, especially the time when she told me she wanted a divorce. "Thank you for coming, Sam. I know you didn't want to talk. Unless this is about the kids and setting up some kind of visits for me, I just don't see why we need to talk, Paulie." "Sam, it's been 4 years, and we haven't really talked. I know you were hurt, and I cared about you too, but with all this time passing, I hoped the tensions would ease. But it seems like they haven't even a little." "Why would they ease? Has anything changed?" "No, nothing has changed. You still made choices that affected us all." I tried to keep calm as she opened her mouth to speak again, but I raised my hand. "It doesn't matter if you saw him before I knew. You still broke the trust in our marriage. You chose to spend time with him while not being truthful with me about where you were. You created a distance that felt insurmountable. You left me to manage everything while you had the kids for most of the time." "That was just how it happened, Sam. I didn't marry David for any reason other than that we connected and were happy." "That's good for you, but it doesn't change anything for me. Should I just find joy because you are?" "Well, no. I just meant that I didn't want to hurt you when we parted ways. That's just how things ended up." "Fine. Good for you. I'm glad my struggles didn't make things difficult for you." "See, that's what I mean. You're trying to make me look like the bad person, like I intended to hurt you, and that's not the case. Whether you intended it or not, you should have known it would happen." What usually happens in a divorce? The mom gets the kids, and the dad becomes part-time. That couldn't be changed. I hit the table with my hand. Yes, it could. It wouldn't have happened if you had been faithful to me. All those times you spent away from home were direct hits on our marriage, and you did nothing to stop it. I don't know what you're expecting, Paulie, but if you think we're going to become friends, you're going to be let down. I'll try to be polite when we have to be together, but that's all I can promise. Sam, you're right, and I'm sorry. I was wrong, and I regret it, but I really want to move past this. I know I hurt you, I get that. But isn't there some way, since it's been a few years, that you could forgive me? Not forget, but forgive. I tried my best not to snap at her, even though I thought she was being unreasonable. She just didn't understand. Pauline, because of you and that situation, I spent years living like a broke college student. I hardly had enough food to eat and lived in a terrible apartment in a tough neighborhood. I'm sorry, Sam, but how was I supposed to know? You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You knew how much money I made. You knew where I lived, and the rent prices are easy to find. You knew how much child support you were receiving. It's simple math, Pauline, but you didn't care enough to see how I was living. You still had your life and your new husband, so you didn't think about me. The girls never said anything, so I thought you were ignoring the truth. The girls never spoke up because they didn't know. I made sure to keep my pantry and fridge full when they visited. I lived on ramen and mac and cheese the rest of the time. Thankfully, a box of mac and cheese can last for 2 meals if you're careful. On top of that, I was trying to save money so I could take them out when they visited. I saved even more to buy that video game. You knew about it, and you still bought it anyway, like it meant nothing to you. You know what? Forget being civil. If we have to share a space in the future, just stay away from me, okay? Just stay away. Sam, I don't... Anything else you want to say, Pauline? This is probably your last chance. Sam, I'm really sorry. I had no idea things were so bad, and you're right. I never thought to look into it. I figured you would tell me if things were tough. Yeah, having my wife leave me for my best friend wasn't humiliating enough. Do you think I would go to them and share how poor I was?" Pauline sighed deeply as if she was thinking hard. I thought about walking out, but I wanted to finish this conversation. "Sam, you're right. I didn't see things from your side, and it was easier for me not to know the truth. I felt guilty already, and it let me believe you were doing fine. It seems you didn't want the truth to reach you. I guess I was foolish to think we could be friends again. I guess we were. But we have our daughters to take care of, and I want to work something out. We need to plan visits for summer and holidays, that sort of thing. Of course, Sam. I would never keep them from you as long as you're okay. We can figure something out." Though the talk wasn't easy, I was glad to have it over. Now, I understood that every time Pauline asked how I was when I picked up the girls, she was really just trying to ease her own conscience. She didn't care about me as much as she wanted to feel assured that her choices weren't affecting me too deeply. I picked the girls up from school, and we went to a mini golf place nearby. We didn't keep score, but we had a great time. After that, we returned to the hotel, and I helped them with their homework. I ordered some pizza, and we talked during dinner. This time, it was my turn to answer questions. I shared stories about my life in North Carolina, but left out the part about drinking too much. I apologized again for how I had acted. They told me I was forgiven and were just happy we were together again. They were especially excited about visiting me in North Carolina. I also told them about Holly. They were surprised to hear that I was dating someone who was expecting a baby, and I asked them what they thought about that. "Wow, Dad," said Wendy. "You're almost done raising us, and now you might be starting all over. That's another 18 years. You do know you're almost 40, right?" Her smile was wonderful. We had always joked around, and I was glad we still could. I think I remember that. Though my old mind doesn't always recall things well, I already have plans for a special wheelchair so I can keep up with the young ones. We all laughed. It felt so good to be with them again. After dinner, the girls went back to their homework, and I went online. I didn't want to bother them with the TV, plus there wasn't anything good to watch anyway. I called Holly after the girls were asleep to catch up. We talked for about an hour, expressing how much we missed and cared for each other. I told her I hoped to see the girls more, and she said she couldn't wait to meet them. After we hung up, I went to bed. The rest of the visit was nice, too. We had dinner out on Friday and went bowling and mini-golf on Saturday since there was no school. I was flying out early Sunday and wanted to make the most of my time with them, and they seemed happy to be with me. Even if they wanted to be with their friends or at the lake, they didn't mention it. On Sunday morning, I dropped them off at home. The girls wanted me to go inside and say goodbye to Pauline. I wanted to set a good example, but it was hard for me. I hadn't seen Dave the whole trip and guessed he was avoiding me on purpose. The plane ride home was a mix of feelings. I was sad to leave my girls, but I was happy things had gone well. I had missed Holly a lot and was excited to be with her again. I took a cab from the airport straight to her house. Barb opened the door and pointed me towards Holly's bedroom. "She's waiting for you," she said with a smile. I stepped into the room and there was Holly lying on the bed. "Quick, come here," she said. "I'm almost ready." Before I knew it, she pulled me closer and I could sense her excitement. After a moment, I knelt down beside her. "I've missed you so much," Holly said with a smile. "I need you." Even though we had only been apart for a few days, we both felt a strong need to be near one another. We took our time together, feeling happy and relaxed in each other's company. We enjoyed the moment until we heard a knock on the door. "It's been quiet for a bit, so I assume it's time for dinner," Barb called from outside. "Come eat and recharge." Holly and I exchanged satisfied looks, smiling a little shyly. We quickly got dressed and headed to join Barb for dinner. By June, I'd moved in with Holly and Barb. I'd been spending almost every night there already, so when my lease needed to be renewed, I decided not to bother. It saved me money, but I made sure to help with the household bills. The girls finished school at the end of May, and I flew them out to visit for a couple of weeks in mid-June. They had a break after school and still got to spend time with me for Father's Day. Holly connected with them right away. While I worked, Holly took the girls for fun outings, like getting their nails done or going to a movie. Every night, Karen and Wendy shared stories about their adventures with Holly, and they kept asking when I would propose. I secretly told them I already had the ring and was just waiting for the right moment. They loved being in on the surprise. There were many tears when it was time to put them on their flight back home at the end of June. I hoped they could visit again before school started in August, but nothing was certain. The next trip would be in November. I wanted to see them in Texas, too, but with work and Holly about to have a baby, I wasn't sure how that would work. We wanted to celebrate the 4th of July, so we made plans to attend Tim's party. When I knocked on the door, Tim welcomed us with big smiles, and that was the first time I learned that he and Holly knew each other. There were people coming in right behind us, so we didn't have time to chat. Tim did congratulate Holly on the baby, though. After we went inside and mingled a bit, I went to get some food for Holly and me. Holly had been really hungry for the last month or so, and even as I piled food on my plate, I knew I would not get much for myself. Tim walked over to me while I was adding some macaroni salad. "You didn't tell me you were seeing Holly," he began. "I didn't think it mattered," I replied. "I didn't even realize you two knew each other until today." "It's a friend of a friend type of thing. She came to a few parties last year. The last one was the Halloween party, I think. She was dressed as—" He stopped speaking suddenly, and when I looked at him, he had a look of deep thought. I watched him for a moment before I interrupted. "What's up, Tim?" He seemed to snap out of it, but still looked lost in thought. "How far along is she?" "About 8 months. Why do you ask?" "It's just... Sam, do you remember the Halloween party?" "Some of it, I guess. I was still drinking, so not too much. Why?" "Well, you might not remember, but you spent some time with Holly that night. I saw you both go into one of the spare bedrooms." "Sorry to correct you, but I clearly remember my date that night had dark hair. Holly, as you can see, is very blonde." "I know, but Holly was wearing a dark wig dressed as Wonder Woman that night. Plus, she had a mask on like everyone else." I paused and thought back to that night. I supposed it could have been a wig. But even if that's true and Holly and I had some kind of connection months before we met, I didn't see why it mattered now. "Okay, let's say you're right. So what?" "Sam, Holly had just broken up with her boyfriend a few months before, and they had been together for years. More importantly, he left her for someone much younger. Neither of you were in a good place back then. I don't know much about Holly's past, whether you were the only one she was with around that time or even that night." "Tim, what?" "My point is, the Halloween party was 8 months ago, and she is 8 months pregnant. Sam, that could be your baby." Tim's last few words hit me hard, leaving me speechless. Could that really be true? Holly and I hadn't shared much about our pasts. She knew about my divorce and how I had leaned on drinking for a while, but we had never talked about my past relationships or how she had gotten pregnant. It was time for that conversation. I set my plate down and left it behind to find Holly. She was with a small group of ladies, and she smiled when she saw me coming. "I expected you to bring food. I'm pretty hungry. Remember, I'm eating for 2? "I know, it's just... we need to talk." I took her hand and led her into one of Tim's spare bedrooms. It might have been the same room where Wonder Woman and I spent time together months ago. Holly noticed my expression and quickly became concerned. "Sam, what's wrong?" she asked as I sat her on the bed. "Holly, I've never asked how you got pregnant. I always thought it was your private matter, and if you wanted to share, you would, but now I feel like I need to know." "I've always thought it was my business, too. Can I ask why you need to know?" "Do you trust me, Holly?" "Completely, Sam. With my life. I have a good reason. I promise I'll explain once we're done. But for now, can you just tell me what happened?" She lowered her head in thought, then looked at me and began to speak. "Terry and I broke up a couple of months before this happened. We were together for years. He kept saying he didn't need a marriage certificate to be committed. Then he left me for a much younger woman. It was really tough for me. What did you do after that?" I know some women might have tried to show they were still desirable, but I shut myself off. I didn't want to go out and ignored people who wanted to help. I was very sad and let myself go. My mom let me be that way for a bit, but then she pushed me to get out. I finally decided to go with my friends to Tim's Halloween party. I knew Tim a little, but my friends told him what happened, so he was okay with me coming. Tim's always good at remembering names. I don't usually drink much, but that night, even though I didn't have much, I felt pretty relaxed. At the party, I saw this guy and felt a strong attraction, so we ended up in one of the bedrooms. He's the father of my baby. I'm sorry, Sam. I didn't want to tell you about this. It's okay, Holly. Really. Now, I know this is personal, but I have to ask something important, all right? Okay. Are you sure he's the father? I mean, was there anyone else that night or around that time? She looked at me with a puzzled expression, clearly curious why I was asking. For a moment, I thought she might get upset or tell me it was none of my business. But then she answered, "No, Sam, no one else. I hadn't been with anyone since Terry left, and I didn't do it again until our first time together." What did he look like? I'm not sure. He was taller than me and in good shape, but we were wearing costumes and masks. What was his costume? Sam? What? Please, Holly, it's important. It was a Scottish costume. He wore a loose white shirt and what do you call it? The skirt thing? A kilt. Yes, a kilt. He had on a beret and he even had some silly plastic bagpipes. As she spoke, I began searching through the pictures on my phone. I finally found the picture I'd been looking for and held it up so Holly could see. Does he look like this? Her eyes got really wide when she saw the photo, and she jumped to her feet. That's him! What is going on, Sam? Why do you have a picture of him on your phone? I've been trying to be patient, but you need to tell me what's happening. I'm sorry I upset you, Holly. I just wanted to be sure before I said anything. Sure about what? Holly, the person in that picture is me. She looked completely shocked, as if I had surprised her. Luckily, there was a chair behind her, and she sat down hard. What? She finally said. Tim took that picture of me when I arrived at the party last year. Holly, I think that's our baby you are carrying. Holly stared at me, trying to process what I said. I could see she was attempting to understand it all. I waited for her to process the news. Honestly, I was still trying to do the same. Slowly, she looked down at her belly and then back at me. Is this your baby? Looks like it. My God, Sam, wishes really do come true. What? I asked, a bit confused. Since I met you, I've been wishing this could be your baby. Wishing it wasn't just a stranger's baby. I know that didn't matter to you, and that's one reason I love you. But I really wanted it to be our baby, and now it is. Oh, Sam, I'm so happy. Holly and I quickly got married at the courthouse right before our baby, Ashley Barbara Beckman, was born. After Holly healed from giving birth, we threw a big party to celebrate. Barbara surprised us all by marrying one of her co-workers and deciding to travel around in a motorhome. She gave the house to Holly and told me in secret that she had been waiting for Holly to figure things out before she moved on. It turned out she had stopped seeing all the other men. With nothing keeping us in North Carolina except for my job, Holly and I planned to move back to Texas to be closer to my daughters. Thanks to the experience I got working for Tim, I found a much better job that paid a lot more. This let Holly be a full-time mom, and since we soon had 2 more kids, that role kept her busy. During my 3 years in North Carolina, Tim never stayed with one woman for long and never seemed interested in doing so. After being back in Texas for 2 years, we got a wedding invitation in the mail, and we didn't know the bride's name. We flew out for the wedding and finally met the bride. Tim always seemed like the kind of guy who would end up with someone really attractive, like a model. But then he started dating Cassandra, but you can call her Cassie, and she was completely different. She was short, around 5 feet tall, and it looked like she had a bit of extra weight. Her chest was smaller than a lot of girls I knew, and she had brown hair that came to her shoulders. She also wore glasses. However, when I saw Tim and Cassie together, it was clear they cared deeply for each other. Tim had never looked happier. When I returned to Austin, Karen was already studying at the University of Texas, and Wendy was finishing up her last year of high school. She had been accepted at UT and a few other schools, but she was still weighing her choices. I encouraged her to find what was right for her, and I promised to be around whenever she wanted to visit. Pauline and Dave were having a tough time. Dave seemed to be worried about trusting Pauline because she had struggled with fidelity in a past relationship. I didn't know if she did something to make him doubt her, or if it was just something he started thinking about. This seemed to happen around the time Karen went to college, so maybe it was just that they were spending more time alone together. I didn't really mind too much, but a part of me thought it was a kind of karma. Before moving on to the second story, please let me know your opinion. Do you like the story long or short, a series or separate parts? The comments section is always welcome, and don't forget to let me know which of these 2 stories you like better. Story 2. Sticking it to Peggy, stood by the window watching the car back down the driveway, turn right, and then vanish down the street. I didn't understand why I wasn't more upset. I had just seen 10 years of my life leave. Didn't I feel anything? Shouldn't I have felt something stronger than just a shrug and thinking, well, I guess I should fix that dripping faucet? As I turned and walked to the kitchen, I replayed the events of the last 30 minutes in my head. When I got home from work, I found my wife Peggy sitting at the kitchen table with a full glass of wine in front of her. I could tell something was wrong immediately. First, she got home before me, which was unusual. She usually arrived about half an hour to an hour later than I did. Second, we had an agreement that whoever got home first would start making dinner, and there was nothing cooking on the stove. And finally, there was the glass of wine. Peggy rarely drank. As soon as I walked into the room, she asked me to sit down and said she had something important to tell me. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down across from her, and she started to speak. "Rob, I think you know this already. There's been something off between us for the last 6 months or so. I'm not sure why we seem to be drifting apart. I don't know if it's me or you, but something doesn't feel right. I've tried to talk to you about it, but you keep saying we're just going through a rough patch and it will get better. I've made up my mind that we need to separate. I'm not talking about divorce, just taking a break for a while. I think I need some time away, Rob. I need to step back, think about my life, and figure out what's wrong between us. You can use this time apart to see it from your side. Come on, Peg. It's not that bad. Sure, we have some issues. What marriage doesn't? But couples can't solve anything if they're not together. Talking won't help, Rob. You believe the only issue in our marriage is that we're not being close. Your answer is for me to be completely open with you. But there's more going on. We don't share our moments anymore because I don't want to. I care about you deeply. I still have love for you, but something feels off, and I need time alone to figure it out. So you want to throw away 10 years of marriage? No, Rob. I just think we need some time apart. I've already packed my car. I'm heading to my sister's place until I find somewhere else. I'll call you once a week to stay in touch. She stood up and said, I have to leave. I promised Mary I'd be there by 7. She walked away without a word, and that really showed me how things were between us. Word spread quickly that Peggy and I had separated. Most of our friends felt sorry for me and tried to cheer me up. Peggy called me each week asking how I was. I'd say I was managing, and she would say she was doing okay. Then I would ask if she was ready to come home yet, and she'd respond, not yet. After 6 weeks, I started hearing troubling things. Some said she had someone living with her. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think she was just taking some time to clear her mind before coming back. But the rumors kept coming, so I decided to find out for myself. I tried to learn where Peg was staying, hoping to see the truth. But no one would tell me, and I began to feel that something was very wrong. I was having dinner with my friend Tom and his wife Tanya when I shared my worries and mentioned that I might hire a private detective to find Peg and check if the rumors were true. I saw Tom glance at Tanya, and she gave him a small nod. Save your money, Rob, Tom said. The rumors are true. Most people who know you are aware of the situation, but they care about you too much to say anything. Say what? That Peggy moved out to live with Adam White. Adam White? Who is he? I don't know him. He works with Peggy. And she just left me for him? That doesn't make any sense. If she wanted to do that, why didn't she just get a divorce? What's with this separation? You know Peg, right? She always makes plans and backup plans and then plans for if those plans don't work. She has been seeing Adam for nearly a year. I think she chose separation so she could come back if living with him didn't match her expectations. And everyone knows this, but no one thought to tell me? Wow, what kind friends I have. I stood up and dropped my napkin on the table. I said, Thanks a lot. I'll just leave now, and walked out of their house. On my drive home, I reflected on what I had just learned. No closeness with Peg for over a year because she didn't want to be close to me. I had been waiting at home, thinking everything would be okay, while she was with someone else. And all my friends knew, but they let me just sit there and wait. Well, I was done waiting. The next morning I made an appointment with the Corliss Investigative Agency and paid them a retainer. I told them where Peg and this Adam guy worked, and asked them to find out everything they could about the two of them. After that, I started making a list of everything I needed to do to end my relationship with Peg. I would wait for the report from the detective agency, but once I had it, I wanted to be ready. After making the list, I sat back and thought about something else I needed to address. I hadn't been close to anyone in almost 16 months, with Peg staying away from me for a year, and then this separation. I had been a loyal husband, but now that I knew what Peg was up to, I wasn't going to stay alone any longer. While sitting at the kitchen table and sipping a beer, I began to plan how to break my long, dry spell. Then I recalled what Tom had said about Peg. She always had a plan. After living with her for so long, I knew that was true. To me, this meant she probably had plans for what to do if I found out about her actions, based on how she thought I would react. The biggest plan of all would be how to deal with me if she decided that living with Adam was what she really wanted. I noticed that she was keeping an eye on me so that if I went out and spent time with someone else, she could use it against me in a divorce. Suddenly, the list I had made felt useless because she might have expected me to react this way. I had to start over and make a new plan. As I thought about it, I realized a lot of what I wanted to do needed to be done quickly, not left for later. There were also some things I could do to really surprise Peg and make a strong point. I smiled at that idea and wondered if she had a plan for how to handle it. The next morning, I went to my bank to deposit my paycheck. While I was there, I checked the safe deposit box Peg and I shared. I saw from the sign-in log that Peg checked the box at least once a week. That meant she was keeping track of me, and if she suspected anything, she would act fast. I thought about it for a moment, then took the 5 certificates of deposit from their envelopes. I went upstairs and made copies of all 5 with the bank's copy machine, then put the copies back in the envelopes and placed them back in the box. Unless Peg looked closely, she would not know about the switch. Since I knew Peg was watching me, I took my passport from the box and casually told the bank employee I was heading to Mexico for a fishing trip. I left the bank with the 5 certificates in my pocket. I usually visited the bank about twice a week. Each time I would cash in 1 certificate, pay the early withdrawal fee, and then hide the cash at home. I didn't trust credit cards. I thought they could lead to trouble, so I only had a few, like an American Express card that required full payment when the bill came, some gas cards, and 1 low-limit Visa card just in my name. Peg, however, had about 6 credit cards in her name, some with high limits. I knew their limits because I paid the bills each month and kept a list of the remaining balances. I made sure to pay the minimum on her cards to keep them active. I sat down and wrote a list of things I wanted. Over the next few weeks, I went on a spending spree using Peg's credit cards. When I left, she would be responsible for the credit card bills, which I intended to be quite high. I upgraded my computer and got a new Dell with all the features. I bought a Remington 700 on eBay, along with a digital camera and a fancy cell phone that could do almost everything. The house belonged to Peg. It had been left to her by her parents, so I couldn't claim it as mine. But we had used it as a guarantee for a loan when we put in the swimming pool and hot tub, and both of our names were on the account. We had paid back what we borrowed, but the loan still existed. If I played my cards right, I could take from that loan before she noticed. I wondered why, when she suggested a trial separation, she packed up and left me in her house instead of telling me to go. Now it made sense. If I stayed in the house, I would naturally expect her to return. I would think this separation was just temporary. Next, I cashed out my $401K at work, paid the fees, and saved the money. Then I waited for the private detective's report. The one thing I couldn't figure out was how to meet someone new. I couldn't risk Peg having someone watching me to see if I went searching. So I decided to leave town on weekends for fishing trips. She knew I loved to fish and that I often came back with catches, so I doubted she would hire a private detective to follow me. There was no need for her to overreact, right? After all, hadn't I been naive? Hadn't she been playing games with me for over a year? It was a Friday, and I was getting ready to leave work when I got a call from Tanya asking me to stop by their house on my way home. I tried to make excuses, but she insisted it was important, so I agreed to go. When I arrived, she let me in and led me to the living room where I found Tom sitting in a chair. He stood up, shook my hand, and told me to sit down and relax while he got me a beer. "Tanya needs to talk to you, Rob, and I want you to know that I support what she has to say." He left for the kitchen, and I looked at Tanya with a puzzled expression. She said, "Just wait, Rob. You'll want to have a drink for this." Tom came back with a Bud Light and said, I have some errands to run and probably won't be back until late. See you later. He left, and the closing door was Tanya's signal to start. Rob, you hurt us when you stormed out that night you were here for dinner. I started to respond, but she raised her hand and continued. Let me finish. You had a reason to react, but it still hurt us. All I can say is that we really like you, and we didn't want to be the ones to hurt you. It's a bit complicated since we are friends with Peg, too, and we hoped she would figure things out and come back to you where she belongs. I'm not going to only focus on the days when I might have a chance to get pregnant. Actually, I won't even tell you when those days are. It might take a long time, Rob, and you've been waiting for so long. We will support each other, Rob, she said as she leaned closer to me. It had been a while since I felt this way, and I knew I wouldn't be able to hold back for long. I mentioned this to Tanya and tried to move away, but she held me tight and didn't let go. I can't hold it much longer, I said, and she kept close, which made me feel overwhelmed. When the moment came, she kept her presence near me, which was comforting. Once I gathered my thoughts, she smiled warmly. Now we can go into the bedroom and start planning for our future. All my doubts faded away as I followed her into the bedroom. We thoughtfully removed layers of clothing, exchanging glances. Then Tanya got onto the bed and stretched out, looking inviting. I read that if we let go and enjoy ourselves, it can help us as we move forward. No hesitations now, Rob. Just be your bold self. Make it a memorable experience, she said, looking at me with anticipation. She showed me that she was ready, encouraging me to join her. I climbed onto the bed, lifted her legs, and we took a step forward together. This time felt different, and the moments we shared seemed to last longer. As we enjoyed our time together, Tanya adjusted herself comfortably. Seeing her like that reignited my enthusiasm, and I soon found myself wanting to share the experience again. When I did, she encouraged me to be even bolder, and the warmth between us deepened. Afterward, she nestled back and said, "Now, I want you close again." I shared another moment with Tanya before I left to go home. Just as I was about to step outside, she thanked me warmly. I would love to do this every day until we realize our plans, but Tom still keeps his routine 3 or 4 times a week. He's okay with this, but I want to be respectful. Call me tomorrow, all right? I thought about all that had happened on my way home. As I parked in the driveway, I wondered if Peg was keeping an eye on me. She might see that I was visiting Tom and Tanya and notice that Tom would leave while I stayed for a long time afterward. The next morning, I called Tanya and shared what was on my mind. She told me not to worry, assuring me that no one would see Tom leave the house. He went down to his workshop in the basement and stayed there until I left. That made me think twice. It felt different to be with Tanya when Tom was not around. But could I really do it knowing he was in the house? Tanya must have sensed my concerns because she said, "Don't worry, Rob, everything will be fine, I promise." Later that afternoon, Tom called and asked if I wanted to grab a drink after work. It felt a bit awkward. Imagine sitting down with a friend you've known for 20 years, the husband of the woman you've just been with. Tom must have realized the tension, so he got right to the point. "I know this is strange for you, Rob. Believe me, it's strange for me too. But we need to talk about our situation. First, I want to be clear. I'm okay with what's going on between you and Tanya. I mean it. But I also need to tell you that Tanya didn't share everything with you. I know she mentioned wanting a child and my issue, but she didn't explain it all. To be blunt, I can't perform. I've not been intimate with Tanya in over a year." Wow! That explained why Tanya was so eager last night. She was trying to catch up. When she said she didn't want me to have what Tom couldn't, it was her way of hiding his struggle. She didn't want me to think less of him, but that didn't even cross my mind. There was a big difference between her and Peg. Tanya always considered Tom even when things were tough, while Peg only cared about herself. "I don't know if you felt it last night," Tom continued, "but Tanya is a very passionate person. My inability to perform was really frustrating for her. She's tried to keep it together, but eventually she was going to look for someone else. I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. I love her, and I know she loves me. But if she strayed behind my back, I couldn't bear to be with her. I would understand why she did it, but I wouldn't be able to handle the dishonesty. The only solution I see is to make it open, but Tanya isn't the type to look for someone while I'm nearby." She called out several times, gripping the back of my head tightly as she experienced a strong wave of pleasure. I stayed close until she calmed down, then gently pulled back. Wow, that was incredible, but now I want you closer to me. Hurry, please. I moved up, lifted her legs onto my shoulders, and slowly came closer to her. Oh, wow, she sighed as we connected, and then I began to move. I didn't just cuddle, I was really engaged. She sighed with delight as I continued, her legs wrapping around me. Her hands held onto me firmly, wanting me to get even closer. For several moments, I continued to move steadily until I noticed her body shudder again. She seemed to embrace me, and then I followed her lead, feeling a rush of warmth. I took a moment to stay still, letting everything settle. Then I gently withdrew. I kept her legs up to help everything settle. After a little while, I suggested she put a pillow under her, then let her legs rest down. Tanya looked up at me and said, "She walked away from this? That seems wild." With that compliment, I felt it was only right to show some affection, and as she said, "I want it to stay," I chuckled and said, "If there's any left, it'll stay right where it is." And I brought my attention back to her. Moments later, she returned the favor, and soon after, we shared that closeness again. I realized that my friend Tom was right when he mentioned that Tanya was quite affectionate. She enjoyed it again before I walked her and Tom to their car. Tom shook my hand, and Tanya gave me a friendly gesture on the cheek. We all agreed that it had been a good day and that we should do it again soon. Anyone watching might think we were simply discussing our barbecue plans. On Monday afternoon, I met with John Abbott from the Corliss Agency. He handed me a report and said, "I'm sorry. Every time I go through this, I hope there's been a mistake, but this time it looks serious. Your fee will also cover our court appearance if you decide to pursue this." I shook his hand and left his office. On the way home, I didn't feel as angry as I thought I would. Maybe it was because I had already come to terms with what was happening, and by the time I received the report, I had made peace with everything in my mind. What was I going to do about the situation? Nothing I hadn't already thought about. All I needed to do was take money from the house's credit line without Peg finding out until it was too late. I planned to see a lawyer and get the paperwork ready, but I would wait to serve it until I was prepared. For the next 5 weeks, I spent time with Tom and Tanya about 3 or 4 times each week, either at their place or mine. They told others that I was having a tough time and they were trying to cheer me up. I still got my weekly phone call from Peg, but I stopped asking about her and when she would come home. Eventually, I reached my limit. I wrote checks against the credit line, and once they cleared, I found an apartment and moved out. I also had Peg served with divorce papers. Instead of saying it was because of cheating, I wrote irreconcilable differences. I did this so Peg wouldn't know I had discovered her secret. She would think I was trying to get her to come home. She would call me, claim I was overreacting, and suggest we meet for a drink and dinner to talk. I would agree, listen to her, and then tell her I would think about it. This would buy me a few more days for the checks to clear and for me to take money out of the bank. Things went just as I expected. First, I got a call where she said I was being unreasonable and there was no need for lawyers. I told her I was tired of being in the middle. "You don't want to be with me, so it's time for me to move on." I agreed to meet her at Angelo's. It was the first time I had seen her since she left, and she looked well. I was going to miss her. No, I already missed her. It was clear to me that I still loved her, but even if she came back, I knew I couldn't live with her again. I didn't tell her that. Instead, I listened as she shared her thoughts. She mentioned that she was going to a therapist and was helping Peg understand her feelings, and that Peg was making progress and just needed more time. "I know it's hard for you, but it's hard for me too. Please, just a little more time." I said I would think about it. After 2 days, I called my lawyer and told him to move to the next step. He canceled the divorce papers and notified Peg that the filing was stopped. I received a call from Peg at work. She thanked me and said I wouldn't regret it. I smiled, knowing I didn't regret it, but she had no idea why. But she would soon discover the truth. That night, I had dinner at Tom and Tanya's house. After dinner, Tanya and I went to her bedroom. As she got comfortable, she said to me, "Can we spend some special time together tonight? I want to share this moment with the father of my child." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Absolutely. The home test showed positive on Tuesday, and the doctor confirmed it this afternoon. You're going to be a daddy." We shared a meaningful moment that night, one that felt deep and fulfilling. When it was over, I told her it might be a while before I could see her again. I'm going to end things with Peg and White this week, and I may have to leave town for a bit. Don't make any hasty decisions, my love. I will need the father of my baby around. That would be Tom, sweetie. You should begin to think like that. You know what I mean, my dear. Just because I'm expecting doesn't mean I won't need you anymore. Adam White was a member of the Fraternal Order of Eagles. Since he became Sergeant at Arms, he never missed a meeting. He left that Wednesday's meeting feeling positive. After speaking with some of the more influential members, he thought he had a chance to run for a higher position. He was still in a good mood when he got out of his car in the parking lot of his condo. He locked his car, turned around, and suddenly felt a sharp pain before everything went dark. A neighbor found him and called 911. Paramedics took him to the emergency room. There, they discovered that both his arms and legs had been broken, and he had a severe injury that required surgery. When he finally opened his eyes, he found himself in a hospital room, unable to move. His arms and legs were in casts, and he was in traction. He saw Peggy standing next to his bed with a shocked look on her face before he drifted off again. I wasn't there when it happened, but later I learned what took place. A man walked into the room, approached Peg, and asked if she was Margaret Olson. When she confirmed, he handed her some papers and informed her she had been served. Confused, she opened the envelope and saw that she was being sued for divorce, this time for infidelity. She looked at the word infidelity and then at Adam lying in the bed before her. Her face turned pale as she realized what it meant. She whispered, "Oh my God," then sat down in a chair, tears flowing down her cheeks. I stayed long enough for the police to ask where I had been that night. As it turned out, I was at a poker game that started an hour before the Eagles meeting and lasted until an hour after Adam was taken to the hospital. Peg unknowingly paid for my cover story. The guys would have helped me without any charge, but I wanted to get back at Peg, so I used her credit card. I ordered digital cameras for Bill and Steve using her Visa. I also bought a laptop for Mike and a big flat-screen monitor for Phil with her MasterCard. She even paid for the baseball bat I got. I had 6 weeks of vacation and 3 weeks of extra time off, so I took 2 months away from work. Once the police cleared me of any connection to White's problems, I made plans to leave town and go on a fishing trip in Mexico. Before I left, I asked my lawyer to hold off on the divorce. I wanted to wait until Peg started pushing for it, then let it go. We would still be married, but I would keep my distance from her. I called Tom and Tanya every week to check in. They told me Peg had moved back into our house. It seemed like her romance with White didn't last, as she hadn't visited him after their last meeting at the hospital. I figured the mounting credit card bills must have overwhelmed her. She probably realized that our savings were gone and that the loans had run out. Eventually, I heard from Tom that Peg was searching for me, but no one could tell her where I was. My boss, who knew the whole story, told her I was gone when she called. He made it sound like I quit without warning. When Peg demanded my lawyer set up a meeting with me, she learned that I had canceled the divorce and settled my bill with him. Now he no longer represented me. With no options left, Peg filed for bankruptcy 4 months after my fishing trip. She lost the house, had to give up her fancy car, and started driving a used vehicle. Once I heard that, I returned from Mexico, rented an apartment far away from Peg, and did my best to avoid places where I might bump into her. Tanya was 5 months pregnant and looking great. We picked up our relationship again, but this time we didn't have to worry about anyone watching us. A few times a week, we would spend the night together. I had been back for 2 months when Peg found out. One day when I finished work, I saw her waiting for me in the parking lot. She stepped out of her car and walked toward me, but I chose to ignore her. I got into my car and drove away slowly. In my mirror, I saw her rush to her car, so I kept my speed down, allowing her to follow me. I wanted to talk to her, but not in the work parking lot. After about 10 minutes, I pulled into the parking lot at Bud's Bar and Grill. I was already at the bar, ordering a drink when she arrived. As soon as she spotted me, she came over and started raising her voice. "Don't think you can run from me!" I knew Peg well and was ready for her. I turned around on the stool and caught her wrist just as she swung at me. She winced as I said, "I have plenty of reasons to be upset with you, Peg. It's best to keep your hands to yourself." I let go of her wrist and continued. "I wasn't running away. I drove slowly so you could follow me here. I didn't want to discuss our issues at work." Everyone here knows about you already. I want to talk to you, she insisted. I don't want to talk to you. I've heard enough of your stories. I want my money back. What money, Peg? You took out a loan against the house and half of what we had was mine. I want it. You're not getting it, Peg. I believe it was fair to keep it after what you did to me. The lawyers call it compensation for pain and suffering. I think what I have is fair after going without for a year and a half while you were with someone else. Rob, I lost my parents' home because of you. That doesn't seem to matter much to you, considering you moved in with another man. I want that money. Here's some news, Peg. You'll never see a penny from me. You tried to hurt me, and now you have to deal with the consequences. We'll just have to see what the courts say. It won't matter what they say. You'll need to hire a lawyer to sue me for divorce. Then the court can decide what happens with the money. But as soon as you sue, I will countersue. A good lawyer can delay things for months, and during that time you'll be the one paying. Can you afford that? I have all the proof I need to fight you in court, and if I win, you'll be the one facing the repercussions. The worst thing that could happen to me is being told to divide our stuff. I would just say, "Okay, Judge," and then leave the courtroom. You and your lawyer will wait a long time for the money, but it never comes. You try to call me, but I don't pick up. Your lawyer, who you're still paying, returns to court and gets an order telling me to pay by a certain time. You both wait and wait, but when that time comes, you still haven't received anything from me. Your lawyer, still charging you, goes back to court and wins a judgment against me. I don't have any savings or checking accounts they can take. My car is on a lease, so that won't help. I live in a furnished apartment, which means there's nothing of value there. The only thing you can do with the judgment is take part of my paycheck, and when that happens, I'll just quit my job. So what do we have here, Peg? You've spent a whole year on lawyer fees for maybe just $200 from one paycheck. Then, your only choice is to go back to the judge and have him threaten to send me to jail if I don't follow his orders. All that will get you is a postcard from me from a little fishing town in Mexico where I will stay until my money runs out. And I have plenty of money thanks to you. Face it, Peggy, you hurt me, got caught, and I got back at you. Consider yourself lucky. Think about what happened to your boyfriend and count your blessings. He lost a big part of himself and now he can never be with another man's partner. But you can still choose whoever you want. I knew it! I knew you were involved in what happened to Adam. What you think you know and what you can actually prove are two different things, Peg. By the way, how is everything going with your new relationship? I hear you haven't seen that poor guy since he went to the hospital. What would be the use? You took away his pride. Oh, that's harsh, Peg, even for you. It's the truth. He was impressive, and we had a great time, but I would have eventually gotten bored and come back home. Oh, Peg, if only I had known. All the problems could have been avoided if I knew you would come back to me one day. Oh, no. I guess my actions ruined that, didn't they? I'll have to live with that regret forever. How wonderful life could have been if we had just talked more. You can be really annoying. Yes, Peg. And you are a dishonest person. I finished my drink, stood up and said, "Have a miserable life, Peg." Then I walked out of the bar. 3 days later, I received divorce papers saying we had irreconcilable differences. I didn't fight it, and she got half of our shared assets, plus I was ordered to pay back the money we borrowed. I wished her good luck in finding a way forward and threw the final papers in the trash. She must have believed what I said because I never heard from her again. In the middle of this messy situation, something interesting did happen. Everyone agreed that White was not very nice, but even unkind people can have a friend or two. One of White's friends was Peggy's boss. He didn't like how she treated White after he lost his job, so he decided to let her go. The economy was struggling, and they had to let some people go, so Peggy lost her job. Everyone knew it was because of her actions. She couldn't find work nearby, so she moved to California to live with some family. Since then, not even her sister has heard from her. There's one more part to this story. It ended sadly, but it also marked a new beginning. Tanya had a lovely baby girl, and Tom really doted on her. Uncle Rob often came by and spent hours playing with little Martha on the floor. Tom never shared the whole truth with Tanya or me. He knew why he couldn't connect as before, but he kept it a secret. He was sick with cancer, and by the time it was discovered, it had already spread. After his funeral, Tanya gave me an envelope meant for me. The front said, For Rob's eyes only. I looked at her, and she shrugged, saying, "I don't know what it is. It's sealed, so I haven't opened it." I opened the envelope and read, "Hey, bud, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I chose you," yes, it was me, not Tanya, "to be the guardian of our child. I knew I wouldn't be there, and I wanted someone I trusted to look after her. I knew I could count on you. Please take care of my family." I handed the letter to Tanya. She read it and started to cry. I held her to comfort her, and when she had calmed down, she asked what I would do now. "I'm going to do exactly what he knew I would do. I'm going to take care of my girls." 6 months later, Tanya and I got married. Hey, audience! If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.